Unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs for short, more commonly known as drones, have become the staple of modern warfare ever since their iconic use in the war in Afghanistan in the early 2000s by the US. 2 decades later, drones have nearly unmatched military capabilities, and it's showing in the ongoing war in Ukraine. Instead of traditional infantry and vehicular combat, Russian and Ukrainian forces are locked in a stalemate of relentless drone warfare. Both sides are trying to minimize their own casualties by deploying drones en masse to launch grenades and bombs and perform kamikaze strikes against the enemy. Some more recent developments are even using AI to locate and lock onto targets, perhaps removing a human soldier entirely from the equation of war. But how did we get to this point? Where did drones originate, and why do they have such terrifying combat capabilities? To answer these questions, let's take a crash course in the history of aerial warfare. The potential of aerial vehicles in warfare began even before World War I, within a decade after the invention of the aircraft by the Wright brothers. European militaries realized that an airplane could provide vital reconnaissance and tactical support from above. An airplane's ability to go behind enemy lines in the air and report on enemy positions while staying relatively safe from ground-based fire was considered the primary benefit of developing flying vehicles. But there are some setbacks too. Early airplanes were relatively bulky, slow, and fragile man-operated vehicles, discounting them as a potential offensive weapon before World War I started. But that didn't mean the aircraft couldn't carry weapons at all. The first armed airplanes had fixed machine guns and would be used in early forms of dogfighting. From there, the development of more reliable weapons and sturdier aircraft led to the development of fighter jets. But it was the second use of airplanes that spawned the concept of early drone warfare. Instead of munitions-based weapons, aircraft could carry bombs or other incendiary devices to drop on the enemy. This concept eventually evolved into bomber aircraft, forming one branch with larger and more defensive aircraft designed that could carry dozens of high-impact bombs and missiles to terrorize the enemy. The second branch led to an aircraft that was stripped of most of its survivability, focusing on maneuverability. In effect, the first military drones aimed to be flying bombs that would deliver a deadly payload to the target. The first such developments began as early as 1917, before World War I ended, and included the British aerial target and the US Kettering bug. The Kettering bug was capable of carrying roughly 160 pounds of explosives for 75 miles and was propelled by pneumatic and electronic systems that used a gyroscope to stabilize and guide the craft. Ultimately, the first attempts at making drones into aerial combat staples were only partially successful. The flying bombs never entered service as they were deemed too unreliable to be flown over Allied troops on their way to the target. The research into developing similar weapons continued throughout the 20th century, but drones would not make an entry onto the battlefield until the Vietnam War, although they were revamped to be used mainly for intelligence gathering and recon. It would take a turn of the century to leapfrog the development of the drone into the combat force that it's known as today. The first such drones were used in Afghanistan, partly because the local insurgents didn't have the anti-air capabilities to detect and take down small and fast aircraft. The US would deploy purpose-built combat drones like the Predator, which could fly for up to 40 hours at a time and perform both reconnaissance and attack missions. The combat drones at the time were more similar to miniature aircraft, capable of holding an anti-tank bomb that could be launched at will, all the while being guided by a pilot who could be thousands of miles away, getting near-instant feedback on the drone's position, heading, and status. However, one of the significant downsides of developing these combat-ready drones was their prohibitive cost. An evolution of the Predator called the Reaper would end up costing around $32 million each. It led to memes showing the million-dollar gear being used on suicide missions to bomb rural neighborhoods in the Middle East. The US drones would be part of why America was able to maintain military supremacy over practically the whole world, but it would be another type of drone that drastically changed how the current wars are being fought. While the military was concerned with being able to create more maneuverable and effective drones, the recreational drone sector boomed over the past 2 decades. Drones became near common household items as toys and imaging devices that could take pictures from the air, while also having enormous commercial potential as marketing devices and even delivery vehicles. Those advances led to billions of dollars in market value, which allowed commercial drone manufacturers to develop drones that could fly for longer periods of time, carry larger payloads, and implement better navigational technologies. You could now buy a remote-controlled UAV outfitted with live-stream video feed outputs that could fly for hours for as little as a few $100s, with higher quality devices costing a few $1,000s per unit. The DJI Technology Company of China would end up dominating the industry of personal and commercial drones, representing 70% of all small drones in use across the world. But militaries around the world would soon realize that commercial drones could have a significant combat potential. For example, DJI's agricultural drone can carry around 250 pounds, which is more than enough power to airlift a person and carry them out of a war zone. However, the real terror of the skies are the much smaller DJI Mavic Pro and similar drones, which could be found in retail for about $2,000. The drone has been widely used by both Russian and Ukrainian forces in the ongoing conflict. Its typical use is for reconnaissance, gathering vital information about enemy positions, and tracking vital equipment as it moves across the battlefield. But militaries have quickly adapted the little drone into a big menace. By outfitting it with a larger battery, the drone can stay aloft for a much longer time. This gave the drone an effective range of around 30 miles, allowing it to penetrate deeper into enemy lines and spy on the enemy formations. Of course, the drone doesn't come with a built-in weapon system to threaten the enemy directly, and the army would still need to exert effort to launch an attack based on the intel. But they can be pretty much everywhere the army needs them to be, a small battalion of flying machines that can be deployed at will and patrol an area for a few hours. This comes in handy when you factor in the second augmentation for the DJI Mavic, the ability to carry a bomb. A remote-controlled gripping mechanism could carry and deploy a bomb directly onto, or in some cases inside, an enemy tank, immobilizing or even obliterating a piece of machinery that costs exponentially more to produce and requires a human driver. This means that a single $2,000 drone with some modifications and an expert operator could incur significant casualties to the enemy. All the while, the operator can be tucked safely away in a remote location. Of course, these small drones are not particularly survivable. They have to fly at relatively low altitudes, are not particularly fast, and only have one meaningful way to inflict damage to the enemy: dropping the bomb payload. In some cases, the drone has to physically go with the bomb if it's trying to maneuver onto trucks or behind cover, and as the bomb detonates, it destroys the drone with it. This has resulted in a third modification to the drone, where an RPG warhead is taped to the drone with no way to dismantle it. The drone has a singular goal: to fly into an enemy tank or defensive position and deal as much damage as possible. The Ukrainian army has reported losing 10,000 drones a month, with enemy fire or kamikaze attacks slowly draining their inventory. On the flip side, losing a drone is a relatively minor inconvenience and much less costly than losing a human soldier. This form of replaceable warfare means that neither side is willing to take many risks when drones are patrolling the sky above and can deliver bombs with deadly precision. Both the Ukrainian and Russian armies have used these types of bomb-carrying drones to great effect. Since a single bomb can already devastate a tank, its effect on humans is obviously much greater. Pair that with the ability to appear above enemy positions out of thin air, and this has given the drones a significant psychological effect on the enemy. You've probably seen videos of Russian soldiers running away or surrendering to drones. This means that drones don't even have to deploy their explosive payload to be effective in prolonged, attrition-based combat, further improving their usefulness and efficiency. Of course, it's not only the recreational drones that are being used in drone warfare. Both sides of the Russo-Ukrainian war are developing larger and more powerful drones, as well as receiving different models from their benefactors. One of Ukraine's developments is the Vampire heavy attack drone, produced within the country. This drone is much larger and heavier than the Mavic, with enough carrying capacity to use a mine as its payload. By modifying an anti-tank mine, the Ukrainian army can use the Vampire to drop the makeshift bomb from above. Thanks to the Vampire's large size, it can fly higher than the Mavic and potentially have a longer range when paired with a sufficiently powerful battery. The drone's effectiveness has been noted by the Russian military, where soldiers have taken to calling them the Baba Yaga, a flying witch from Slavic mythology and folklore. On the flip side, the Vampires are much more expensive and less numerous than the Mavics, making them less expendable. If a Vampire is taken down, the Ukrainian army feels pressured to get closer to the front lines to retrieve the drone and repair it for future use. Essentially, soldiers' lives are risked to save a small machine and make it reusable for combat. This is a startling contrast as to how valuable machinery can be compared to human life. This has perhaps been taken to the extreme with the importance of qualified and experienced drone pilots. Both the Ukrainian and Russian armies heavily depend on skilled drone pilots to maneuver these small machines into the perfect position to inflict devastating damage. These pilots have, in turn, become one of the primary targets in the ongoing wars, with entire military strategies developed to take out drone pilot schools or particularly experienced pilots whose positions are known to the enemy. A drone unit being deployed to a position can have a devastating effect on enemy morale. Since the war has somewhat stagnated into trench warfare, drones have the capability to neutralize these defenses. They can fly over trenches and survey which ones are being currently used, then relay this information back. This can create a state of perpetual danger, where a bomb-carrying drone could appear at any given time and destroy an ill-positioned piece of equipment, vehicle, or soldiers. Imagine a trench that is being attacked by the enemy, with soldiers inside who need to be evacuated to prevent further loss of life. If a medical rescue unit attempts to help them in broad daylight, they might quickly find themselves surrounded by drones, with their positions being marked clearly on enemy tactical maps. And if any one of those particular drones carries a bomb, it could spell doom for the entire operation. Even smaller drones can exert this level of battlefield control and disruption. It's a reality that has forced operations into being rescheduled to nighttime when the visibility is lower, even for IR camera drones, or even completely abandoning rescue and assistance missions for low-priority targets. One of the key reasons drones have had so much success in modern wars is partly because they were not meant to be a war device. Modern anti-air systems were designed to detect, locate, and destroy fast-moving high-altitude targets that give off significant heat signatures, such as jet engines aboard aircraft or missiles. Drones, on the other hand, have rather small frames and practically negligible heat output. They also fly relatively close to the ground, often weaving between buildings and trees. This makes them practically invisible to long-range anti-air systems and much more difficult to shoot down by conventional anti-air defenses. Of course, they're still vulnerable to traditional fire from rifles, but this would mean that soldiers would have to give away their position and become prime targets for additional drone attacks. Currently, the Ukrainian army is using nets to prevent drones from getting close to vital buildings or into defensive postings. This means that the armies have relatively little in the way of counter-drone threats other than pressuring drone pilots with their own drone squadrons or using other squads to make targeted attacks. Eventually, this could force the army to channel too many resources into countering drones and not enough into creating a defensive force to repel traditional attacks such as tanks or artillery. Drones currently have few effective counter-tactics. Small arms and anti-air rockets are typically the last line of defense against these machines, so the first defensive measure both Ukraine and Russia use is electronic interference, signal jammers which prevent the drone pilot from effectively using the drone. In some cases, the drone might become completely inert and fall from the sky entirely. Currently, Russia and Ukraine are testing each other's drone jamming capabilities relentlessly, and Russia has an advantage. The Russian military command has created a centralized drone warfare strategy, allowing Russian jamming devices and drone squads to operate relatively independently. In addition, Russia's drone operators pilot their devices relatively far from the front and out of range of jamming signals, preventing the two systems from overlapping and possibly interfering with one another. There's not really an analog to that kind of tactic on Ukraine's side. Ukraine's military doesn't have this sort of unified approach, and drones can, on occasion, receive signals intended for a completely different drone, with the pilot losing contact with their own. The result? Imminent mission failure and loss of the device. Additionally, many of Ukraine's systems are not modified before they're deployed into combat. Because they're using commercial drones such as the Mavic, most drones will operate on the same signal frequency as the ones that can be bought from the store. These signals are more susceptible to being jammed, and Russia's jamming systems are relentless. According to a report by the New York Times, the Ukrainian army considers the lack of system enhancement in drone squadrons to be the second biggest issue, right after Russia's jamming technology. Without soldiers proficient in coding and cryptography, Russia can overwhelm the Ukrainian drones through technological superiority. That doesn't mean that Ukraine isn't developing high-end systems of its own. The Mavics and the Vampires may be the newest generation small drones, but the army is unleashing their larger brother. The Raybird 3 is a state-of-the-art combat drone developed by the Ukrainian company APC Skyton and first put into service in 2016, with upgrades in 2020 to make it even more powerful. According to Skyton's information, the Raybird 3 can stay aloft between 18 and 28 hours, and some claim the operating time can be extended to over 30 hours. This far outstrips the capabilities of a recreational drone, currently used as a pawn on the front. Furthermore, the drone's operational distance is over 1,500 miles, with a top speed of around 120 miles per hour. It's primarily designed as a long-range UAV for reconnaissance and targeting. The chassis can withstand temperatures between -30 centigrade to +50, making it durable in all kinds of weather and hostile terrain. According to Skyton, this drone could feasibly fly from Kyiv to Munich, report on what a person is looking at on their phone, and then fly back to Kyiv to complete the mission. If true, this would mean that Ukrainian drones could easily reach far into the Russian mainland. One of the key capabilities of the Raybird 3 that makes it practically invaluable in modern warfare is its ability to be deployed and launched semi-autonomously. The staging system, a crossbow-like design, can be assembled and launch the drone within 20 minutes of arriving at a location, and then be disassembled in only 2 minutes. This is a vital characteristic to ensure the survival of both the drone and the pilot. Since the Russians are constantly monitoring nearby airspace for new drones, a Raybird flying into the sky might suggest to them that its pilot, or at least the launch system, is relatively nearby and could be targeted by Russia's own drones. By minimizing how long the launch system is visible from the air, the Ukrainian army can mitigate the need to deploy the drone closer to enemy territory, thus ensuring that the drone can reach its intended target faster or stay in the air for longer. Furthermore, the Raybird has built-in systems that shield it from electronic interference and make it more resilient to signal jamming. It can operate semi-automatically. If the operator picks a target or a location, the drone could feasibly fly to it without manual path corrections, relying entirely on the internal navigation systems to reach the target unscathed. With a combination of a light fiberglass frame and aerodynamic fuselage, alongside strong anti-jamming systems, the makers of the Raybird claim that the drone is nearly invisible to Russian anti-aircraft radars, further enhancing the drone's survivability while in the air. Need proof? A Russian social media website recently showed a photo of a felled Raybird near the Krasnodar region, around 130 miles behind the front lines. This demonstrates that the drone can feasibly operate much deeper in Russian territory than other models, giving Ukraine a fighting chance against Russia's overwhelming drone resources. But one of the biggest setbacks of the Raybird is its cost. While the Mavic costs only $2,000 to purchase and not much more to modify to be reliable for close-range drone warfare, a single Raybird 3 is estimated to cost $250,000. This means that the Ukrainian army and the Raybird manufacturer are hard-pressed to obtain more funding for this type of device, considering that the Ukrainian army is already lacking equipment and finances in many other areas. On the other side of the front, the Russian military is not experiencing such financial setbacks. The state-industrial complex is more than capable of refilling its drone supplies on a massive scale. Furthermore, Russians are currently using many more devices made by DJI, the same Chinese manufacturer behind the Mavic, including the Aeroscope drone detector. This means that Russia's drone warfare is effectively backed by an independent company working with Russia's biggest ally and trade partner during the war. It could also mean that Russia might eventually get access to enough technologically advanced detection and anti-drone systems from DJI to counter the threat posed by the Raybird and other drones in Ukrainian possession. Simultaneously, the Aeroscope system is no longer in production, according to DJI's website, which could mean that the system is not capable of detecting Raybirds effectively. The addition of newer, more battle-ready drones even has the potential to completely push out humans from most avenues of modern warfare. Long-range artillery and missile capabilities have already been made as automated as possible. Contemporary missiles such as the Storm Shadow use 3 different navigational systems to autocorrect their flight path and lock onto the target. And the Storm Shadow is not an entirely new design, considering it was developed in the late 90s and the UK and France have already started creating a more modern upgrade. While modified recreational drones such as the Mavics are one step towards that, they require a human pilot, and a skilled one at that. However, the advancement of AI development is threatening even that area of expertise. AI-guided systems, similar to those found on modern missiles and launchers, could feasibly allow a drone to automatically patrol an area and lock onto its target without human assistance. The scenarios from sci-fi movies would finally come true, where drones would outnumber, outgun, and outmatch humans in close-range warfare. The rapid rate of AI advancement poses a few problems for countries that currently rely on drones to carry out attacks. First, the AI systems in drones and other military deployments pose more of a threat to civilians. If the targeting system is left entirely to the AI to make decisions on what and who to target, a drone could feasibly go on a rampage in an inhabited area. Without proper acknowledgement of how AI targeting works, military leaders could pin these deaths on the machine and classify these human losses as collateral damage. It would be difficult to take a commander operating a drone squadron to trial for war crimes if they were never in control of the machines in the first place, and the AI algorithm simply decided who to target based on predetermined and possibly vague parameters. To counter this development, the Red Cross and other human rights groups have proposed several legally binding declarations that the use of force must be human-controlled to preserve accountability. While these are yet to be enforced, even they contain shortcomings. Thus, legal experts argue about the ramifications of letting AI control any part of an automated weapon system. For example, what may be currently legal to implement in an AI system might not be moral, and vice versa. By investing heavily in drone warfare, and particularly in AI to guide the drones, the world's major military powers could be opening a veritable Pandora's box. Drones could fly completely independently of their human operators, and eventually, wars might be fought solely as AI against AI. The consequences of that could be catastrophic. In the end, humans may not need to apply for military service if there's no need for them. But what do you think? Are drones the ultimate military force that would make human soldiers effectively obsolete? Let us know in the comments, and thank you for watching. Now go and check out how Turkey has built the world's biggest army of killer drones, or click this other video instead.